Kyle Whittingham had his first of what will be many weekly press conferences. What were the biggest takeaways from Utah's head coach's media availability? That's what we'll be discussing on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're in the market for a second listen, Locked On College Football or Locked On Big 12 have you covered as fall camps have now closed and we are in the midst of game week. Can't wait to get it all started. But first, I want to talk with you about the sponsor of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You can visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Ethan Pearce of UteZones. And Ethan, when we're talking about Kyle Whittngham, he's always an interesting guy, what he's going to reveal and give to the media. So these press conferences are always fun. It's like, okay, what's he actually saying when what he's commenting about? But I thought he talked about a number of interesting things. And I think the first relates to one of the biggest questions we have about Cam Rising for this season, right? His overall health and how he'll be used. And one of the things that Kyle Whittngham did talk about, which Andy Ludwig spoke on not too long ago either, is that they've just had a lot of conversations with Cam about, hey, be smart with where you scramble. Be smart with how you run because we want to preserve your health over everything. Cam has gotten to hurt a lot when he scrambles. That's how it's happening in both Rose Bowls, I'm pretty sure, actually, is when he kind of scrambled. Maybe the first one, it was when he got sacked. But I know for the Penn State one, the worst injury is when he kind of scrambled. So I do think that Utah is going to be very smart with how they use Cam. And I believe because of what Cam's been through, that he's also going to be much more cautious this year. And Utah's at their best with Cam is on the field. So I am absolutely loving that.
Yeah, and it's nice this year that we know Cam Rising will be the starting quarterback for game one, because last year we kind of got, teased a little bit all season long. It's like, okay, he's coming back next week. He's coming back next month. He's coming back whenever. We're going to have him on Thursday, and hopefully not for the entire game, right? Because it's going to be Southern Utah. So we should not have to have him play in the second half if we don't need him to. But yeah, just get Cam, started off on the right foot, get him, a nice, easy game, non-conference game, get his feet back under him. Same with Brant Keithy, and let's get this thing rolling.
This thing is about to get rolling too. That's what is so exciting. The season is just a couple days away. And one thing I also found really interesting is talking compared to last year. You mentioned last year's fall camp and how crazy it was with Cam's injury, as well as several other injuries. It's really encouraging to hear that Utah is mostly injury-free. There's a couple, right, that have happened along the way, but this is always the case in college football, right? But nowhere near what happened last year where no Brant, no Cam, even the first week, Junior. Last year, if you were to go like going into last season, if you would have asked me who are Utah's 3 best defensive tackles, I would have said Samote Pepa, in no order, by the way, Junior Tafuna and Aliki Vaimahi. I think Vaimahi did play a little bit, but I know for a fact Tanu Vasa and David Fotu started the first game against Florida. It's like, oh my gosh, you don't have any of your top D tackles against an SEC team, and Utah was able to go out there and take care of business, and that's an advantage of the depth. But we also didn't see Connor O'Toole for so much of last year. Van Fillinger was hurt. Logan Fano got hurt. Just injuries are so much what plagued this team last year. So it's been encouraging to hear Kyle Whittngham and this media availability, as well as the other ones, talk about the adjustments they made during fall camp and to avoid those injuries, as well as the injury bug, just because sometimes it's just unlucky, has not bitten this team, because this team fully healthy is capable of doing special things this fall.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good to see them, coming out completely unscathed, pretty much. I mean, Whittingham said today, really no injuries to report.
Yeah.
And that's great, because that helps them build that continuity going into the season too, because I think that was a big thing for them last year. You don't know who you're going to have available every week. You don't know who's going to get shuffled around, who's going to play, who's not going to play, just with all the injuries they had. And, Jim Harding spoke about this last week with the O-line, how they're keeping everybody at the same position all camp long, and they're not going to move people around. They just really want to try to build that consistency as much as possible, because there's going to be a lot of unknowns this season, but the more you can keep things the same, I think the easier it'll be on the players.
Absolutely. And one thing that's been fascinating to watch play out over the course of fall camp was, of course, the quarterback battle. We now have it where we always knew Cam Rising was one. Isaac Wilson, in some ways surprised, in other ways not, maybe, earned the backup 2 job. But people were wondering, okay, so what about Brandon Rose and Sam Huard? Kyle Whittingham did shed some light on that battle and situation as well. He said if it happened like today, Brandon Rose would be QB3, but Sam Huard would still be competing for QB4. There was a brief stretch where this is where I'll take full credit. I was wrong. I thought for a moment Sam Huard actually was going to be the backup, because what does he have that is so important in college football? Why do we all like this Utah team so much? Sam Huard has the most experience. Isaac Wilson and Brandon Rose have combined to play 0 snaps of live college football. So that's something that obviously is a little bit concerning. And when you heard the coaches raving about how quickly Huard was picking things up, I was like, okay, maybe he's going to maybe he'll end up being QB2. But Wilson was able to win the job. He picked things up fast. He's done obviously a good job not turning the ball over, because we know how big Kyle Whittingham is on that. But looking at QB3 versus 4, I think there are a lot of people that felt like, okay, this is kind of it for Brandon Rose. He's been brushed off to the side. But the fact that as of right now, he's still he would be QB3, I think shows you how his development has kind of been strong and coming along as well. And if Sam Huard is your 4th QB, a guy who was a starter at Cal Poly last year, Ethan, I feel really good about this Utah quarterback room this fall.
Oh yeah, they've done a great job of rebuilding that quarterback room and feeling confident in their backups, because last year without Cam, it was a struggle. We saw, right? Nate Johnson, some good moments, right? Same with Bryson Barnes, some good moments, a few good games, just as many bad games, right? Bad, low moments. That game against Oregon State comes to mind, where they just could not move the ball at all. Terrible. But now, even if, God forbid, Cam does go down again, it seems like they feel really confident in Isaac Wilson, a true freshman earning that backup job. That's big, because they do not often put that amount of trust into a true freshman like that. And you've got experience behind him. Brandon Rose, I know he hasn't played, but at least he's been around the program for a couple of years. And so hopefully he knows the offense and is able to step in if they need him. And like you said, Sam Huard, that's just a luxury to have as your 4th quarterback, a guy who started last year, at a lower level, of course, but still that college experience means a lot for them.
When you look at last year, Luke Pittari was this team's 4th quarterback, and he's now even been moved back to the 5th. And look, this is just the way that things have shaken out. Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson, I both felt like were good backup options last year. Hence why Utah went 8-4 in the regular season. Yes, the bowl game did not go to par, but there were also a lot of opt-outs that contributed to Utah's loss in that one too. But let's also look at the situation. Utah was able to go 8-4 with backups, because what happened to Nate Johnson? He transferred to Vanderbilt. Based on everything that's been reported, he's going to be the backup quarterback there. Bryson Barnes, he's going to be the backup at Utah State as well too, with their quarterback from, I think it's something Patterson, or Pearce is the one who transferred it from Iowa, who's going to be starting there as well. So the fact that Utah was still able to do that last year with 2 quarterbacks that are now just, once again, backups at their other schools, shows you how impressive the overall depth of was this team. And we know too, especially that Oregon State game, right? Like, this offense is even playing not to lose. They're playing to win. And when this offense plays to win, how quickly people forget Utah averaged 38 points per game with Cam Rising leading the charge in 2022. And the weapons are even better, in my opinion, this year. Because no, there's not Dalton Kincaid, but hey, Brant Keithie's pretty dang great too. And he could put up a season very comparable to what Dalton did. He's done it before, right? You look at some of the wide receiver options. Dorian Singer, we knew he's the number 1 receiver. He's been named it once again by Kyle Whittingham. So I'm incredibly fired up about the weapons that Utah has. And I'm just fired up to get the season rolling. And Kyle Whittingham is too, mentioned as much in his media availability. Still a couple of interesting things that caught my eyes, or more so ears, since we're talking about what we heard from his press conference, that I want to continue to talk about with all of you in one moment. But first, want to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you have a long list to do for work or a list of just do-it-yourself projects you're trying to tackle at home, you can take 5 Hour Energy shot and you can check everything off your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects for your home. When you get supplies for the project, you know how annoying it can be. You have to go back and get it again, and then you don't have the energy to keep it going. But that's where you need that boost from 5 Hour Energy. What I love about 5-Hour Energy is it's the brand that hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy and hectic day. You always know where to find 5-Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience drug and grocery store nationwide. You can stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5-Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5, not spelled out, the number 5 energy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy products today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB, LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, no spaces, to receive $20 off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used on other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. You can go to 5hourenergy.com today and get in on the action with 5-Hour Energy. I also want to talk with you all about another sponsor of Locked On Utes, our friends at Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Hey, Locked On Utes fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. In this amazing game and simulation that's right, I'm talking about Ultimate College Football Head Coach. You get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the coach of the Utah Utes? From recruiting players and hiring coaching to your staff to overseeing training camp and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling the offensive plays. So your strategy will not only be determined by the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for you Locked On Utes listeners. You can use the promo code Locked On CFB. That's right, the same one as 5-Hour Energy. Locked On CFB, all caps, no spaces, to go inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure you take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. All righty, we're going to continue to talk about what we heard from Kyle Whitttingham today in his opening press conference. But Ethan, I'm curious for you, as someone who followed along all fall camp, what were you most surprised by during fall camp? Or what was your biggest takeaway as this team was gearing up to maybe make a run at the college football playoff?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of hit on some of the surprising things already, like Isaac Wilson winning the backup job. You know, that was, I think, nice to see. I think that for me, though, the thing that I've been watching the most closely is the running back battle, because there's still, not really a ton of clarity on what we're going to see going into the season. We have Mekhi Bernard named as the starter of the first string, but with the way Whittingham's been talking about it, it kind of seems like that's still up in the air, right? There's a lot of guys that are competing to have touches at running back, Jalen Glover, Mike Mitchell, Hunter Andrews, switching positions. You still got Dijon Stanley in there. There's lots of guys that are vying for this job. And I like Mekhi. We know Mekhi. We've had classes with him, and I think he's great. I think he's a real weapon in the passing game and in the running game. And his veteran leadership is really, I think, shown through for them. But I'm interested to see how that shakes out over the next couple of weeks.
I'm fascinated by it too, because like you said, Mekhi's the veteran, right? I'd be shocked if on third and longs and even third and shorts, he won't be in the game, right? Because he's the best pass protecting block. He's the best receiving back that they have. But Jalen Glover has been biding his time for a long time now, and we know how eager he is to have an opportunity to really showcase it this fall. Mike Mitchell's talked about it several times. He wants to be RB1. This is a former 4-star recruit, and he has bought in, made the physical transformation that you see players make from year 1 to year 2. So he figures to be a key contributor. And when you have the speed that Dijon Stanley has, you have to give him opportunities to make plays in space. And Utah's going to letting him be a returner a little bit too, but he's going to factor in offensively as well. So I do think the running back position is one that has been kind of fascinating to see how it plays out. And he even reiterated that today, to your point, right? He said there's no clear-cut running back one. One thing that is still very interesting, though, is one of the guys who we thought was also going to factor into that race in the running back room a little bit is John Randall, a former 4-star recruit. Well, at least for right now, Utah felt like he would be best served to play this year at cornerback Whittingham said he wasn't going to factor in much at running back. So felt like, hey, let's put him on that side of the ball. He has the speed to be able to contribute. No, he's not the biggest for a running back size. He's only 182, which for, a lot of college running backs isn't this, you have to take so much of a physical toll. I feel like sometimes you want your weight to be a little bit higher. For example, Mike Mitchell is 20 pounds heavier than John Randall, and they were playing the same position until he switched to defensive back. And I think some people were kind of like, I even saw someone in the comments was like, why are you moving a running back to cornerback? And I'm like, hey, you know what? All the comparisons, when you see them, like, we're not there. So I don't know exactly why this guy goes there, but I'll say this. Utah moved a quarterback to a running back in Jaquindon Jackson, and that worked out pretty well. They moved a wide receiver to a defensive back in Teo Johnson. That worked out pretty well. And they moved Connor O'Toole from a tight end to a defensive end, and that went pretty well. So whenever Utah moves a guy, Hunter Andrews is now going to be a running back from a linebacker, right, for this year. It's probably going to work out well. I think the coaches have more than earned our trust on these position changes, and I'm excited to see these guys take the field. Who knows if we'll see John Randall at all, and maybe he'll even be a running back by this time next year. But I love that Utah is like, hey, this isn't football like 100 years ago where you say you're this position, like you're only playing this position. They're fluid. They understand the needs of their roster, their team, and they say, hey, this guy's a really good football player. Yeah, maybe he's best at this position. He's more familiar with this position, but we think collegiately with the right coaching, he could be even more successful at this position. And I love that this Utah staff does that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, too, that these are kids, right? Like, these guys are young. They're just coming out of high school. And so switching positions is part of growing in the sport, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like they're entrenched and they've played in the NFL at running back for 10 years. Like, that's not the situation we're in, So I think that's part of these coaches' jobs as coaches and as mentors to help them realize their full potential as a football player. And if that means switching positions, then that's what it's going to mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see how these position changes take shape this fall. One thing that we did not see a position change needed for is anyone else in the defensive end room, because it's absolutely loaded. Kyle Whittngham was asked about, ended up talking about today, some of those positions on his team where he feels like he's most loaded at. And he said that they feel like they're incredibly strong at defensive end and tight end. And I think that shouldn't be too much of a surprise, right? When I was talking about the tight end room recently, I said it was the best tight end room in the nation, because you look at what Brant Keithy, Carson Ryan, and Landon King have all done. I don't think you can find a group of 3 more accomplished tight ends. And the fact that Dallin Bentley is right now listed as tight end 2 just shows the incredible depth of that room. So that's 4 to Caleb Lohner, I think, in goal line fade situations, maybe just because he's a great athlete. He's still so raw, but Mickey Sugar-Taraga produced for this team last year. So that's 5 tight ends, at least, not even including Lohner, that I feel really good putting on the field. Then the defensive end room. I mean, my gosh, when you look at the top 4 in particular, Paul Fitzgerald had 8 sacks last year, and he's the 4th best D end on this team with Logan Fano, Connor O'Toole, and Van Fillinger. And I'd even group in defensive tackle. I was talking about that group earlier on this show, just discussing the depth in there as well. I feel like those 3 positions in particular, it's the depth akin to some of the best teams in the country. And I think all of those positions will be key reasons Utah's success in 2024.
Yeah, no question. Utah, I think that we've been really blessed to see some amazing tight ends come through this program in the last couple of years. You've had guys go to the NFL, and, Brant Keithy's going to see himself there pretty soon. And you've got young guys too, Landon King, I think, had a really great year last season. So he's going to play, and Caleb Lohner, he's just really fascinated me to see like what he's going to look like, because I guess he's going to play basketball too still, potentially. We'll kind of see how the season goes for him. But even if it's just like a goal line package or something, I'd love to see him get on the field, just because it's an interesting situation.
Absolutely. I think this Southern Utah game is a great opportunity for him to see the field. And speaking of this game against the Thunderbirds, some of you may be listening and maybe thinking, hey, Utah does have a game this week. You haven't talked at all about the actual opponent. Well, that's because it is Southern Utah. The last time Utah played them, they won 73-7. Now, as you guys will hear in a preview I have coming out tomorrow with the voice of Southern Utah, Spencer McLaughlin, this Southern Utah team is improved. So it should not be a 73-7 game. And that game, even if we look back, I forgot that started a little slow. Utah started slow in that.
I think it was 14-7. It was early on.
I think so.
Yeah.
It was one of those weird things where you're like, what in the world is going on here? But Utah's not taking this team lightly. They don't take anyone lightly. And if he was asked about it, he said, we don't overlook anybody. And he even mentioned how, hey, Montana State just went down to Nevada and took care of, no, they went into New Mexico State and they took care of business. Heck, I could bring, Nevada just beat SMU, who's in the past, they wouldn't have been as crazy an upset, but now SMU's an ACC team. So you can't take anyone lightly in today's college football. And the one thing, especially with this being week 1, Ethan, these guys love what they do. They love any opportunity they can get on the field and showcase their talent, let their hard work come to fruition. And they've been waiting so long for this opportunity. I think they're going to come out fired up. I don't expect them to be sleepwalking through the first game.
No, I agree. I mean, this morning I kind of went out to my car heading to work and I felt the first chill in the air, and it feels like football, Yes. It kind of starts like us fans, we're getting hyped up. We're excited for this season. The players feel the same way. They're ready to get to this. Fall camp is long and it can be hard sometimes, but the light at the end of the tunnel is really what all these guys are looking forward to. And even if it's, non-conference game, not quite the entire, not the entire reason they're playing, right? But just to get a game under their belts, to get going on the season, I think everybody's excited for it.
We absolutely are, man. It is almost here. In fact, we had a week 0 game this last weekend. And while I was watching this Florida State team struggle against Georgia Tech, I was reminded of one of the reasons I'm so high on this Utah team for this fall. And I will be revealing what that reason is in one moment. But first, want to take an opportunity to talk with everyone about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at Ibata. Summertime is winding down, but that doesn't mean it's not time to take that dream vacation. Or if you've been thinking about it but dreading the cost, that's where Ibata comes in clutch, because you get cash back on all of your purchases. You can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or of course, that fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibata, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery store, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and many more. It's time to join the over 50 million users who use Ibata to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Locked On is offering our listeners $5 just by trying Ibata and using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. That's right. Just sign up, use that code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, and you'll get $5. Just go to the App Store, Google Play Store, download the free Ibata app, and start earning using that code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store using code LOCKEDONCollege to start saving with or earning more with Ibata today. All right, close this out with a couple of final thoughts from Kyle Whittingham's media availability. He did mention that Cameron Calhoun is a guy. He was listed as a backup on the depth chart, but he is a guy that they expect to be a big factor this fall. Had surgery over the summer, which was announced today. And Cameron Calhoun's a guy, a 4-star defensive back who just won a national championship. No, he did not contribute to that Michigan team, but he's the guy who saw what it takes to get there. 4-star corner, so he is incredibly talented, Ethan. And I'm fired up that he's already making strong progress and going to have an opportunity to contribute to this team in 2024.
Yeah, I think it was interesting to hear Whittingham mention him because, it's not a name that we're thinking of a ton, but I think that he could make an impact here. Like you said, a highly touted recruit, played under Jim Harbaugh at Michigan last year. So it would be great if we could see him make an impact. But Utah is, there's a reason they're the favorite to win the Big 12, right? They're loaded at every position. So playing time is going to be tough to come by for anyone, right?
Absolutely. And I'm excited to see him have an opportunity. Another guy, who might get an opportunity this fall is Jonathan Hall. Thought he was going to be safety, ends up transitioning to linebacker. And at first I was like, but then the more I thought about it, I was like, actually, that does kind of make sense when you look at his physicality, his speed, his style. It's a position too Utah has wanted to add to, and they feel like he does have his highest ceiling at that position. I thought he was pretty good in the Northwestern bowl game, but you look at how he was playing inside the box too, and he was a thumper. And to me, I've said it many times, Lander Barton, Karene Reed, awesome. Outside of that, Sione Fotu, maybe he'll be better this year. He had his struggles last year. So you're adding a guy in Jonathan Hall who, to me, played at a high level when given the opportunities. I really like that. I think he's right away this team's fourth best linebacker. Maybe it'll take a little more time for him to acclimate to the position, but I got to believe he's going to see opportunities on the field this fall because he was just too good when given those chances to not be considered for a larger role as a linebacker depth piece.
Yeah, I think so. And I think he'll be fun to watch too, because like you said, with his physicality, I think that position switch does make sense. And, like we were talking about before, this is not as big of a shift as going from something like running back to corner, right? It's kind of, you're still kind of staying on the defensive side, a little more of an easy switch there for him. But yeah, I think it should be fun to watch it. And when you have guys like Lander Barton and Karene Reed in there, I think it just makes it easier on everybody else too, to have a big season, because the Utes have a really, really great linebacker core, and they have a history of developing linebackers into NFL players. So there you go.
Yeah, you want to keep this group fresh. You want to keep them ready to go, and it helps when you have that added depth for sure. So always fun hearing from Kyle Whittingham. We'll continue to react to his press conferences weekly here on Locked On Utes. But one thing I also found very fascinating from this past weekend was watching this Florida State team take on Georgia Tech. Florida State was still picked 10th, despite everyone they lost last year. And why were they picked 10th? Well, they added all this projected talent in the transfer portal. Now, don't get me wrong. What I'm not about to say is completely bash the transfer portal, because the transfer portal can be a very good thing. It's benefited Utah tremendously. You look at the Dalton Kincaids. Heck, Utah got Cam Rising through the transfer portal. The transfer portal is important. But when you rely on the transfer portal to completely reshape things, it usually doesn't come together in the first few games of the season. It takes time for it to grow and develop. Jared Verse is an NFL defensive end with the Los Angeles Rams now. He's gone, and there were all these transfer additions that came in, and everyone was like, oh, this is going to be one of the best defensive lines in the country. And it clearly was not. They had massive issues dealing with Georgia Tech. So we watched that game. DJU tremendously struggled in his new offense, and there were a lot of issues with Florida State. They missed their receivers. They lost Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. A lot of losses that they're just like, oh, we replaced all this with the transfer portal. Why do I bring this up? Continuity is so important in college football, and Utah has some of the most continuity you will find. Cam Rising, Brant Keithy. There are so many guys on this Utah team that have been a part of both Pac-12 championships, let alone just even the one in 22, that it's hard not to feel extremely confident in this team, because we've seen this collection of players do it together. Why do we talk about the Utah front seven being really good? Because pretty much everyone is back. Florida State had like 20 players opt out before their bowl game maybe against Georgia. So you factor that to then even the other guys who declared for the NFL draft. It was a completely different roster, basically. This Utah roster has so much familiarity, and it's one of the many reasons, Ethan, I feel so great about this squad making a run deep into the college football playoff, because you need experience to win in college football. Saw Michael Penix and Bo Nix, two of the older players in the sport, find success. Utah roster is littered with older players, and it's one of the many reasons I think they're going to have a huge season this fall.
Yeah, I mean, it's real. I think the transfer portal is best when it's used to plug holes on your roster. Right?
Agreed.
It's not going to be like, okay, we just built this entire defensive line out of the portal. We built it, especially on the line too, on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. That's a unit that requires cohesion and consistency. Like we talked about at the top of this episode, right? They need time together, and fall camp doesn't do it all the way. You need real live game reps. And so it's important to have guys who have been through it together, played together for a few years. If you need a left tackle, like if you had a senior graduate, you need a good left tackle. Yeah, go into the portal and grab, a player with experience, and you can just slot in and play, right? But if you're trying to rebuild the entire thing on the fly, it's just not going to work. And I think that Utah, with all their consistency, I think has really been the theme of fall camp in general, and a reason why a lot of people have picked Utah highly, because it's not just with football too. I think the best teams in college are usually the ones with the most experience. We see that in basketball. We see that in other sports too, and so I think it's just a thing. You got to keep the team together as much as possible. nature of college football, that can be hard sometimes, but that's what Utah has. And that's a big reason why they're going to be special this year.
1000% is. And Ethan, we both think this Utah team is capable of big things. So when the ceiling's pretty high, it's hard to make a bold prediction. But I want to know, what is your bold prediction for Utah football in 2024?
All right, here we go. I'm going to throw something out, and some people might think I'm crazy. I think Utah goes undefeated this season. Is that bold enough for you?
Well, undefeated this season is in just regular season?
Regular season. We'll see what happens when they get into the playoffs. Regular season, I don't think they lose a game. I think their hardest games this season are at the start of conference play. It's Oklahoma State and Arizona. And then, UCF could be a little bit of a challenge for the final game of the year. But if they've got all that momentum, I think they're going to finish it all the way through. So as long as they can start strong and get those 2 games out of the way, this team is going to be really, really, really good.
Yep. Last time Utah had a schedule that looked like this in the regular season, they finished 11-1. And that team did not. And that team was really good, obviously, that 2019 team was. But it's not that realistic to think this team could be 1 game better than that 2019 squad, have an undefeated regular season. I sure hope that comes to fruition. And what's great is it's almost time to be done with predictions because the season is here. And I am fired up to watch it get rolling. Ethan, you're going to be covering it all season long. Where should everyone head over to if they want to absorb more of your work?
UteZone.com. It's going to be great. We've got a great team over there. We've had a good amount of turnover in the last couple of months, but I'm fired up to be joining UteZone and jump back into college football coverage. I love Sammy Mora's work, and I thank her so much for bringing me on. And so you can read more from her, read more from Dan Sorensen, Michelle Bodkin, people who have covered the Utes for a long time, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
And Ethan, I feel lucky and appreciative that you jumped on with me tonight. Thanks again, my friend.
Yes, of course.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. As I mentioned tomorrow, the voice of the Thunderbirds, Spencer McLaughlin, joins me, and he's also Locked On College Football head coach, the host of Locked On College Football. So if you want to see more of his content, head over to Locked On College Football. You can follow Ethan on X as well, and make sure you tune in tomorrow's show as we'll be previewing Utah's game and going over my final predictions for Utah football this fall. Look forward to seeing you then.